Good morning! Welcome to the Good Life Meditation for the 20th day of February 2018. This is my daily activity to remind myself of my objectives and principles and to prepare myself for a productive day where I make good use of the time that I have and further the cause of making the world a better place. Lofty goals, but worthwhile. Let's go. First, my 6 objectives. The first of these is objective number 1, to be always ready to die. To ask myself, have I got my house in order, my relationships in order, and my creative activities, my avocations in order? And let's see, now with regard to the house, I'd say no. I gave some more critical consideration to that thought over the weekend, and there are 3 things that I really want to take care of. One, and I'm going to resolve to begin taking care of these, even to the extent of starting to cut down on some of my outdoor adventuring so I can focus on this. The first is I need to, even though I have a good insurance, life insurance and the like, disability insurance, I want to have a bulletproof disability insurance plan in place. I'm the sole, well, I'm not the sole, but I'm the primary, by far, breadwinner for the household. If something were to happen to me, that would really devastate my family. Disabled or die. If I died, it'd actually be better if I died, because it'd be in good shape for whatever transition they need to make into a new life. If I get disabled, long-term disability, that's a pretty bad one. So I'm going to be seeking after some, I'm going to make an appointment for Thursday with my insurance agent to begin exploring a real plan of action, so that, let's say for example I do get cancer and I'm taken out of work, or something, stroke happens or whatever that happens, and I'm taken out of the work for a long time or permanently, something that will make sure that my family is in good shape for a long time, or at least long enough for us to transition into a new circumstance. So I'm going to work after that today. This Thursday. The second thing I need to work on is we incurred some debt coming over to the United States, and I got that under control at one point, but it got a little out of hand again with some things that happened in life, and I need to get that under better control as well. I need to wipe that out, and I'm going to explore some options, including maybe part-time work on the side to begin knocking that down. I think that we could probably handle it in pretty short order with better budget management. We're not doing that as good as we could, but so I'm going to do that as well. And then the third is to simply begin working more closely with my wife in particular, but also including our daughter in our budgeting activities, to be more active about that. So I'd say no. I'm not really ready to die right now, and I need to get the financial picture in better shape. And how about personally? Am I ready to die? Have I got my relationships in good order? Definitely, with my wife and my daughter and my brother and my mom, as best I possibly could. Definitely in very good shape with my wife and daughter. And I don't really have relationships with anybody else anymore, and so that could be considered a weak point for sure. But I really don't want those relationships anymore. It's a strange thing to arrive at a position in life where I'm just really not interested in having friends anymore. Really, just and it's largely because I won't go. How do I do that? I back myself into a corner here. There's better uses of my time than just catching up on news and shooting the shoot and all that kind of stuff. It's just I'm not interested in doing that anymore. I get enough of that with my wife and my daughter. I have other things I want to do with my time. So I guess that sounds kind of callous and kind of maybe kind of haughty in a way. But But it would be disingenuous, as I like to say, to pursue friendships with that when I don't want to be spending time on those things. So artistically, creatively, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. But that's I have more work to do there too. So yeah, well, I spent a lot of time talking about the first principle, being always ready to die. Let's move on to the second one. Good and effective use of time. Wow, that dovetails right just into what I was just talking about. I don't feel like cultivating friendships isn't a good use of my time. I don't have much interest or need to pass time talking to other people about things that are really not very interesting. And I really backed myself into a corner there, huh? There's no way you can get out of this, because I can get away from this, because now that I've opened the subject, because being antisocial is a negative thing in our society, and I'm definitely being antisocial. And that's because the vast majority of the time that I found the vast majority of the time that I'm spending when I'm socially with people is engaging in filler. It's filler conversation and talk, just talking about our days and our life and our problems and how to get through those. And I know that stuff's important, but I don't have much interest in that. I'd rather spend my time alone, walking the dog with a really good book, or swimming, or just quietly alone with my thoughts. Maybe this is a side effect of going alone too deep, too far. Let's see. So make good use of time. Next, number 3, the cultivation of good development and maintenance of good, sound life principles. That's exactly what I'm doing now. And usually I give an example here now, but I know I've wasted a lot of time already, so I won't. I'll just skip on. Next, number 4 is the cultivation of good emotional reactions to respond well to the day, to unexpected things that happen through the day. Oh, good gosh, my fingers are so cold. My pinky finger on my left hand is just screaming in pain from the cold, even though I've got the heated grips on max. Wow. So it's kind of like that, but when instead of having a pinky pain, it's like when you feel that pain of upset that rises up in us, instead of screaming out at the world, gosh darn it, it's instead to react in a more managed way, control my emotions, ask where they come from, and then have a good measured response. Number 5, the performance of good actions, just do good things throughout the day. And 6, the recognition of true limits and true opportunity. Just now listening to an interesting lecture, Yale history series. Isn't it wonderful that you can listen to such things for free on the internet? And it was talking particularly about the Greek influence on Western society, and how it influenced Christianity, the Judeo-Christian tradition, and introduced that temperance of emotion to reason. Use a reason to look at things critically, even including our emotional ideas. Ideas that otherwise might not be able to stand on their own. And how that produced the West. Interesting ideas. So I try to do that myself. By applying reason to the world and to recognize where my limits are, and to also recognize where my opportunities are. For example, my limits are with regard to my finances. I have a finite amount of money that comes into the household, and I'm choosing to live in a very expensive lifestyle by virtue of the community where we live, so that our daughter can go to a really good school. So that's a limit. My limit's my ability to get my finances under better control. An opportunity, though, is to take a more hands-on approach to that and control of our finances, to make sure that every dollar's being well used and applied towards our goals. So limits and opportunity. There's an example. Now let's get on to the 20 principles. The first of these is the principle of war. I'm awake every day, ready to go to war with everything that I hold true. That includes, of course, these 6 objectives and 20 principles. I don't want to find out their weaknesses so I can toss away what doesn't work. 2, reason, and the sub-principles of honesty and objectivity. Reason, of course, allows me to discover where my ideas are faulty by virtue of looking at the world objectively and being honest with myself about what I find. 3, the principle of the homunculus. The homunculus is a made-up idea of a little man that lives in my head and drives the ship, so to speak. I didn't make that word up. You look it up, you'll see old pictures of little men inside of people's heads, little men or women. And I simply use that to remind myself that instead of thinking I've got some immortal soul that will survive my death, I don't. It appears that I have a homunculus, a consciousness that will die with me. No apparent immortality in store for us. At least no one's been able to demonstrate that in any convincing way. Not convincing to me, at least. Next, number 4, the home of good and evil. Good and evil are the opinions that we hold about right and wrong, and as such, they're subjective. Now, we can make objective determinations about right or wrong. If you and I agree about something that's right, then it's objective to the extent that we agree. But otherwise, there doesn't appear to be right and wrong written large in the stars. There's it would be nice to have, no, it wouldn't be nice to have a 10 commandments like description. It would be nice if we want to be lazy, if we don't want to actually do the hard work of figuring it out for ourselves. But it wouldn't be nice insofar as if it's a mandate from above, then we have no say, and we have no chance, no opportunity to exercise our maturity and reason. And so I guess that comes down to trust. Do we trust ourselves to do so? And I think it's an iterative process. I'm comfortable with living with the failings that we make along the way as we work towards discovering for ourselves and agreeing upon what constitutes good. Next, 5, the principle purpose. I'll use the word biology to simply mean the mandate that comes from our biological, from our cells, basically, our genes that tell us how to live well. And basically that is to survive and to make more of ourselves. That's one purpose. Outside of that, I don't think there are any other direct purposes in the world, so I make up my own. My purpose is to be a virtuous man, where virtue is defined as the objective improvement of well-being, like things like making sure that everyone has a chance to vote. All citizens have a chance to vote. That there's equality between the sexes and the races. That there's clean, good, efficient sanitation, so that we don't have to, live in our own filth and suffer disease as a result. Things like that. Look at that, sun's about to blast up. Next is 6, the atomic principle. Everything's made of bits and pieces, flowing and changing and forever transforming. You and I are the same way. We're made of atoms and molecules, and when we die, these will rot away or be burned up, and those things will either be reused or dissipate off into space as energy. The principle of nature. Excuse me, number 7. Everything in the universe has some nature, and it's good to recognize what the nature of these things are so that we can live in better accord with it. For example, it's the nature of my financial situations to be constrained by my income and pressured by my expenses. I have the ability to manage my financial life in accordance with those things, but it's worthwhile to recognize what the true nature of my finances are so that I'm not fooling myself into thinking otherwise. Next, the principle of maturity. This consists of wisdom and fortitude. A mature individual is someone who has experience and the willingness and ability, the strength to apply that experience towards better ends in the future. It's a powerful person who can do both. It takes time and a lot of willpower. Next is the social principle. Human beings are social animals. We need one another to survive, and our best ends are social ends. So I try to apply myself towards improvements to as many as possible. And if I'm improving myself, it's towards the end of making myself a more refined and a better instrument in that larger aim. Next, the Feast of Offal, number 10. Offal is, of course, what's left over when a butchers an animal, you know, skin, bones, and the like. And they can reuse, most of us wouldn't consume that outright, but we can reuse it to make edible things like sausage. But it's a curious thing that humans also produce kind of a waste and byproduct of our poorly principled and undisciplined living. That is our anger and frustration that we spew out into the world, honking our horn and waving our hands and getting mad and saying sarcastic things. It's a strange thing, though, that unlike a butcher slop on the floor of the butcher shop, nobody would pick that up and eat that. Human beings are more than happy to eat one another's offal, the filth that comes out of one another, and we chew that up and swallow it down, and then it makes us upset, it makes us sick, and we then spew that out for others. So what I try to remind myself is to, one, not spew that stuff out myself despite how I feel inside. That comes to temperance, which is the next principle. And two, to not consume the offal that others are giving out, and that is managed through apathy, which is also the next principle. So let's get on to it. Number 11, temperance. Temperance is the controlled consumption of all things, like food, drink, work, play, everything and all things. And there are three sub-principles: suffering, simplicity, and apathy. Suffering is our ability, and also temperance applies to our emotions, the consumption of our emotions. That's where it comes into the Feast of Offal thing. One, suffering. We suffer when we deny ourselves what we want. That's why if you can withstand suffering, you can become a more temperate person. Simplicity, living a simple life, is by definition a temperate life. You're limiting our consumption of things as a way of life. And apathy, a word that gets a bad rap, but it's actually a power. It's actually a very, very strong thing when you apply it in the right way. Apathy, when applied to the things that we can't control, actually liberates us from being connected to those things. I can't control if a man cuts in front of me all of a sudden, but I can be prepared for it. I can't control if I get fired at work today, but I can be prepared for it. I can apply apathy to both of those things, and instead of flying off the handle and getting upset, I can use reason and a controlled composure to then simply deal with the situation in a reasonable manner. It's a lofty aim and a very worthwhile one. This is something that I find myself doing every day. Next, number 12 is the agency and the great indifference. Anything that's alive is an agent, and the things that we create are the artifacts of our agency. When you subtract out all the agents and their artifacts, you're kind of left like a moonscape or out in deep space. That's what I call the great indifference out there. It's the indifference of nature to us. You know, the absence of God, a universe without a perception of a universe without God. Some people say that they're feeling God out there. I challenge them to demonstrate that that's true. I think it's wishful thinking. It's something it's a feeling that you're creating in yourself. My own experience of a lifetime in wild places alone is it's just simply an empty waste out there. There is nothing, no agency out there, and if it is out there, it's doing a damn good job of hiding. So that's agency and the great indifference, and it's good to recognize that, because to know that if we want love, caring, compassion, and help, then we need to turn to one another, not to put our hands in prayer and pray to an imaginary deity. Next is 13 is the best seat in the house. To not want to be anyone else, be anywhere else, or be doing anything else, but to be okay with just who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing, while at the same time striving towards a better situation and a better life and a better circumstance for others. Next is the risk of avoiding risk. When we're young in life, we're told to watch out for money, get married, and get a good job, get a good education. And those are all good things, but I would like to offer that we live very long lives, and if we don't attend to the deeper interests, the deeper human needs that we have, mainly of artistic, creative, adventure things that we want to attend to, we're going to kind of find ourselves with an empty bag later in life. So I recommend to attend to those things, those important surface level risks, but also go after the deep level risks by living an adventurous, interesting, dynamic life, especially in your youth or in your 20s. There's plenty of time to settle down to a career, family, and security in your 30s and beyond. But understand there's a risk you may miss those if you give those up early. So it's a trade-off. It's a risk. Next is that's why I call them risks. The next is the sin and damnation. There are 5 sins in my worldview. They are falsity, credulity, faith, superstition, and dogma. And these are sins by virtue of the fact that we're accepting or things that have not been shown to be true, or being overly willing to accept things that are not true. And even though I've separated them off into 5 separate things, they're all basically the same thing. It's an unwillingness to suffer our beliefs to go through the gauntlet of reason and come out the other side intact. If we don't push them through that, then there's a risk that what we're believing is not true, and that's a damnation in my estimation. It would be a damnable thing to live a life believing untrue things. So next is complete oblivion. And when we die, it seems like if we don't have a soul, and there doesn't appear to be any God, or there would be no afterlife, then we're complete oblivion. Then is to be wiped out completely when we die. And as a result, there's no final reunion with the ones we love. We'll never see them again. There's no final reconciliation with anyone who we left on sour terms with, and no final justice for if someone gets away with their crime. So attend to those things now in the here and now. Next is the great life adventure. I mentioned earlier about giving yourselves the decades of the 20s to attend to those deeper level risks of life, and I do that through what I call the great life adventure. Optimally, you'd have a really, really big great life adventure. You know, that grand tour that people used to take in the early part of the 19th century, sending their kids to Europe for the grand tour is a nice example. Doing something similar to that. I would recommend, if I had to do it over again in my 20s, I'd go as far as I could with education, probably get a master's degree in something something practical, something that I can get a job in, but also something that interests me. And then after I got my master's degree, I'd head out and see the world. You know, go to explore the world as far as I can, have as many adventures as I possibly can, make a lot of mistakes, meet a lot of people, have a lot of conversations, find out that I'm wrong about a lot of stuff, see a lot of different worldviews, and then come back to find someone to share my life with, and then settle down and start a career and a family. I think that I'll be more satisfied in the later in life, having had that great life adventure, and then maybe more along the way, smaller ones along the way, and also set a great example for my kids, rather than simply hunkering in at an early age to a sheltered life of security, safety, and the comfort of beliefs that really haven't been tested. And now I'm down to the last 2. Next is the season of philosophy. That's a time in life when we're ready to share what we've learned by virtue of our living. And what I found is that there's a little voice that speaks in my head. It's nothing supernatural. There's no reason to think it's anything other than simply my creativity. But it's my little creative voice that speaks up and says, I've got something to say. And I find that when the muse speaks, I better write down or record what the muse is saying. I personify it as a she in some way, for some reason. Write it down what it says at the time that it's being said, because otherwise it will be lost. Particularly note that what the muse says when you're in your 20s will not be what the muse will say in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, or beyond. And that if you don't write down what you hear at a particular decade of your life, you won't get a chance to repeat that later. So I've kept a journal all my life, and I write down the sayings of my muse throughout time, and it's interesting to hear, to look back at that now and realize how diverse and how in many ways so immature wow, it's heavy today. How immature my youthful muse was, but still almost like a laying brickwork on a building. You know, I needed to have those rough, coarse foundation elements to try them out and to get further along the way to the more, dare I call them, more refined musings of my later life. So they're worthwhile, and it's interesting to look back on them. Although I don't think I'd ever want to publish that stuff. So that's the season of philosophy. And then the last one, arena and utility. Life is an arena for the execution, the practice of these objectives and principles, each of which is like a little tool on my utility belt. So through the day, as I'm going through the day, I realize, what's this opportunity? You know, what's an opportunity for temperance? Or maybe here's an opportunity for to exercise apathy, which are the two of the big ones that I use throughout the day. And then I find that they're there by exercising this, by thinking about it every day. I find they're right there, pull them out, and use them. And as I'm about to use here at work, it's time to me get in there and be a tempered, apathetic, reasonable man. And with that, I'll go ahead and sign off. I wish you all the best. Take care. Have a great day. Make it a good life.